Hi everyone, so this is the last video of Llama Out Loud by Annabelle Sami. We're going to be finishing the book in this video today. So let's start. Which chapter are we on? We're going to be reading 4 chapters. This is chapter 25, Listen to Me. Yasmine was running, her rucksack bumping on her back. On and on she ran. Down Brick Lane, past the curry houses and the sweet shops. Still in her spotty pyjamas and slippers, might I add. She dodged through the crowds, moving her legs as fast as she could and crying bitterly. In her mind she saw Papa's face, so disappointed and angry, and even worse, those formidable words, "You are forbidden from playing checkers." She passed the traffic lights at the end of the road. Through her tears she could see all the people waiting at the bus stop, staring at the girl running down the street in her PJs. Her cheeks were red and her lungs ached. She just wanted to get away from Ami and Papa and everyone. When she reached a roundabout, Yasmine slowed down. She didn't know where she was. Everything seemed unfamiliar. In a hurry to get away from the road, she spotted a fence behind some bushes. She could at least duck behind there for a while, until her parents stopped following her. She took the rucksack off and threw it over the fence into tall green grass. She heard it hit the ground with a hard thud from a short distance away. Then, unsure how to scale the fence unharmed, she followed it around to a patch where the fence panels were loose. She squeezed through the opening and pushed through the shrubbery, pulling the strap of her bag towards her. As the undergrowth cleared, she could make out a series of little sheds. This definitely wasn't someone's house. Where was she? She started to weave her way through the long grass, eventually finding herself on a small dirt path. On both sides were the little sheds with wire fences. Yasmine approached and peered through. All of a sudden, a flash of feathers came flying at her from inside the fence. It was a chicken! Yasmine leapt back, startled. There were more pens running down either side of the dirt path. Walking on, she saw geese, ducks, turkeys, and even a pheasant. What was this place? A bird hotel? Written above one of the sheds was a sign, City Farm. Yasmine had never heard of City Farm, but maybe it was a good place to hide until she could figure out where to go next. There was no way she was ever going home. The farm was surprisingly empty for a Saturday morning, apart from the odd worker mucking out the sheds. Yasmine walked all around, surveying the animals. There was a small muddy sty holding 2 pongy pigs. A little further down the lane was a larger pen containing a small herd of sheep, huddled together like heavy clouds. On the other side of the lane was a whole clearing for a couple of sad-looking cows, simultaneously munching and pooing. She turned a corner into the last section of the farm. There were 2 large grassy paddocks. In the right paddock were horses, but in the left paddock, lying still in the fresh green grass, were 3 llamas, one of which had a suspicious brown stain over its back legs. Yasmine gasped. Levi? The large living llama Levi's eyes were wide with surprise. He started to run up to the fence. A voice came from behind Yasmine. "Yasmine, stop right there!" Ami shouted, huffing and puffing. Papa was not far behind, thoroughly out of breath. "You are in so much trouble," he called, leaning against a wall for support. Levi rushed up to the wooden fence behind Yasmine. "Yazzie, I'm so sorry. Let me help." Yasmine desperately wanted to apologise to Levi. Because it was Levi, it absolutely was, even though he was bigger and smellier and more real. And he still had his voice. But she could not be seen talking to a llama in front of her parents. Levi gently nudged the back of her head with his nose. "Now's your chance, love. Let him have it." "You'll be going to Pakistan as soon as school finishes," Papa scolded. "If your own father cannot improve your behaviour, then only Daddy can help." "You ain't scared of that, old lady," Levi countered. "Your behaviour is awful." "Now's your chance to be heard," Levi urged. "What have I done to deserve such an unruly daughter? My only daughter." "Ignore 'em," Levi said. "Just listen to what's inside your own noggin." "No more checkers, no more fun." "Come on, Yasmine," Levi begged. Don't let them talk to you like this. You should follow the example of your older brothers, such good boys. Listen to me, shouted Amy. Listen to me, shouted Levi. Listen to me, shouted Papa. Everybody, shut it. Yasmine gazed around her, alarmed. Where had that extremely low and booming voice come from? Papa's mouth was wide open in shock. Amy clutched her hand to her chest. Yasmine, said Amy, slowly for once. Did you just speak? Ha! I knew your voice would be weird, Levi quipped. Now I know why your brothers used to call you Trombone. Wait, had that voice just come from her? Had Yasmine just spoken? No, not spoken. Yelled? Yasmine coughed a little and swallowed. Her hands were screwed up tightly into fists and her head was pounding. Now that she'd started, she couldn't stop. You listen to me, she commanded in her deep voice, quite enjoying the sensation. All my life I've put up with you all blabbering on, telling me what to do, when I should do it, and how. Well, I've had enough. None of these pranks for me. Not the pepper in my napkin, not the rubbish, not the tea trolley at old, not the fish. The fish? Papa asked. Not anything, said Yasmine. I wasn't the one who put hair dye in the washing machine last summer, and the hairdryer didn't break because I was using it as a microphone. It just broke. None of it was my fault, but there wasn't any point telling you because you don't listen. But now I'm finally going to speak up for myself. I deserve to be heard. She caught herself and took a sudden breath. Spinning around, she looked at Levi's big, real, stupid face. He was grinning a wonky-toothed grin and nodding. You do, he murmured. So, Amy and Papa, Yasmine spun back around. I've decided to live here now, with the sheep. Then, when I'm old enough, I'll join Old, and finally be able to play in the checkers tournament final. So goodbye, I hope you have nice lives. Amy gave a little panicked yelp and sat down on the floor. Yasmine, where has this, Papa searched for the word, confidence come from? Yasmine shrugged. Then it clicked. Who was the most demanding, assertive, loud and downright annoying person she knew? Well, not person. Had Levi actually done it? Had he managed to help her? Yasmine wiped the tears from her eyes and started towards the sheep pen. As she walked past her parents, she expected one last shout or one last scolding, but Papa was staring silently at the floor. Then, as she passed Amy, who had stood up again, something strange happened. Amy grabbed Yasmine's hand and pulled her in for a big silent hug. I am so sorry, Yasmine, Amy said, in a volume normal to a human being. We have not been fair to you. In terms of the greatest shocks of all time, Yasmine decided this would come in at number 1. Amy was apologising to her. Amy reached into her bag and brought out her purse, which she slowly unzipped. Spilling out came 4 years' worth of little scraps of paper and notes. I've kept them all, Amy explained, picking through the pile. This one is my favourite. It says, please, 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 can I get a checkers board? I want to learn to play. She held up a note that said, please, 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 can I get a checkers board? I want to learn to play. It must have been from a couple of years ago when Yasmine had first started going to Old. I'm so proud of you, Yasmine, Amy stroked Yasmine's head, and especially how good you have become at checkers. That's why we got you that book of logic puzzles, to help you with your tournament. Yasmine suddenly felt a guilty pang rise in her stomach. The birthday present she'd thought was rubbish was actually very, very thoughtful. Her parents had been listening, just in their own way. My John, Papa was pulling a very funny face indeed. Yasmine realised with surprise that he was trying not to cry. I didn't know you could miss something you've never heard, but how I've missed your voice. He pulled Yasmine into a big hug and sniffed back a few tears. Of course you deserve to be heard. It's hard when you are the youngest of the family. I was the youngest too, and your aunties have always tried to speak over me, even now that I am the man of the house. Yasmine giggled. Amy was suppressing a smirk too. All that talk of being man of the house had just been Papa trying to stand up to his big sisters. Papa finally released Yasmine from his airtight hug. I'm so glad you have finally told us how you feel. Now we know we will never ignore you again. The advice Ezra had given her earlier suddenly popped into Yasmine's head. So, she ventured, now that I've blinked the little light on the dashboard, you know what's wrong with my engine? Amy looked puzzled. Telling us what's wrong means that we can help you solve the problem, yes, said Papa. And you have finally blinked the light on the dashboard. Now, come here and give us a cuddle. Yasmine let herself be squashed in an Amy and Papa sandwich. So, Yasmine, Amy said, getting back to business, your punishment is, of course, cancelled. You will not go to Pakistan to stay with Daddy, and you will play checkers whenever you want. But you've booked the plane tickets, said Yasmine. Amy and Papa were not likely to waste money. Who will stay with Daddy for the summer now? Amy and Papa thought for a moment. Well, Papa pondered, it would be nice for Hamza and Tariq to visit Pakistan. Who? Yasmine asked. Your brothers, Yasmine, Papa said worriedly. Oh, tall brother and short brother, said Yasmine. Papa chuckled and ruffled Yasmine's hair. What a good idea, Amy agreed. It would be good for the boys to spend a summer with their daddy. I'm sure they would love it. They released Yasmine from the sandwich hug, and each took one of her hands. As they led her out of the paddocks, Yasmine suddenly had a thought that didn't concern Amy or Papa or Daddy or even checkers. She turned her head. Levi had been quiet the whole time she and her parents had been speaking. Now he was standing at the locked gate of the paddock, staring after Yasmine. He was still smiling, but Yasmine could see the sadness in his eyes. He was trapped as a real llama now, the one thing he hated, and she was the only one who could help him. Chapter 26, Yasmine to the rescue. By the end of the evening, the blackboard behind Yasmine's bed was chock-a-block. Scribbles of calculations, a huge pros and cons list, a floor plan of the city farm and a map of Brick Lane filled the space. The blackboard looked like Yasmine's brain had thrown up all over it. And it was all leading up to her greatest mission yet. By 9 p.m, Yasmine had the plan sorted in her head. She just needed a little help. Grabbing her school planner, she turned to the class directory and called Ezra's home number. After a few rings, a woman with a warm voice answered the phone. Hello? Hi, sorry to call late, said Yasmine. Please could I speak to Ezra? It's his friend, Yasmine. Oh, hi, Yasmine. Ezra is supposed to be in bed, but you can have 5 minutes. There were a few moments in which Yasmine could hear a shuffling noise and muffled voices before Ezra came to the phone. Yasmine? Hi, Ezra, it's me. Yasmine, you're speaking. This is great. Yeah, I'm still getting used to it, Yasmine coughed a little. She'd done a lot of shouting today, and her voice wasn't used to it. I'm really sorry about storming off at Old. I wasn't angry at you. That's okay. My mum explained that I should give you space, whatever that means. Yasmine smiled. Ezra's mum sounded nice. Could you help me with something? Would you meet me at City Farm tomorrow at 11? Ezra moved the phone away from his mouth. Yasmine heard him yell, Mum, can I go to City Farm with Yasmine tomorrow? His mum yelled back, Have you done all your homework? Yes. All right, now get to bed. Ezra came back to the phone. She said yes. Great, Yasmine said happily. I'll see you there. Bye. Bye. Yasmine clicked the phone back into its holder and settled into bed. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and said out loud, Don't worry, Levi, I'm on it. Chapter 27, the Grand Checkers Tournament Final. It was a scorching hot summer's day, the hottest there had been for years, according to the weather presenter on the news. Everyone in Whitechapel was frolicking through sprinklers in their gardens, with ice lollies dripping down their hands. Everyone, that is, apart from Yasmine and Ezra. They were trotting down Brick Lane with a real-life llama. Attendance at Old had apparently been at an all-time low since Yasmine left. The members were bored with a capital B. There was no drama, no mayhem, and nothing to talk about. So when Ezra called Mr. Matthews and explained that he was helping the city farm rent out a new type of therapy animal, Mr. Matthews had been over the moon. He wasn't aware exactly what type of animal it was yet, which brings us to Ezra knocking on the door of Old and giving Yasmine a big thumbs up. She was hanging back, holding the reins of a llama who wouldn't keep still. It was a big day for Old, what with the visit from the new therapy animal, and it also happened to be the grand final of the Old Checkers tournament. Remind me again why this is a good idea, Levi hissed, fidgeting against the rope. Mama Llama will see that you're a changed man, Yasmine whispered back. I mean, Llama, helping the community, doing good deeds, spitting on the elderly. Levi, Yasmine tugged his rope. I'm joking, said Levi. I won't spit. If this will help turn me back into a toy llama again, I'll do anything you want. He kicked his foot against the ground and shook his matted head. Even as a real llama, Levi was still scabby. The door creaked open. Mr. Matthews craned his neck out. Ah, Ezra, you're here, he said. And you've brought an alpaca? Levi gasped. I'm offended. We don't all look the same. Actually, it's a llama, Ezra corrected. But I also brought, he gestured to Yasmine, my grandma. I probably should have mentioned that Yasmine, at this particular moment in time, wasn't Yasmine. You see, since Yasmine had been banned from Old, she had to enter in disguise. With the help of her aunties earlier in the day, she had gone undercover in a pair of big bloomers, a pink blouse and a knitted shawl. For good measure, Auntie Bibi had even drawn some wrinkles onto Yasmine's forehead with a felt-tip pen. She looked like the real deal. To begin with, they weren't sure it would work, but as Yasmine walked through the door with Levi in tow, Mr. Matthews introduced himself. Why, hello there, he said, and welcome to the Octogenarians' London Day Centre. Yes, I am old, Yasmine said, suddenly in her low voice. She was a bit nervous and not sure how to behave. What have I got myself into? Levi groaned. Mr. Matthews raised his eyebrows. How old exactly are you? 80, Yasmine blurted out. 82. And what's the llama's name? Buttercup. You've got to be joking me, said Levi. Mr. Matthews looked at Ezra, then to Levi, and then finally back to Yasmine. Brilliant, he said. And what shall I call you, Mrs. Yasmine seized up. They hadn't thought of a name. What would be a convincing name for an 82-year-old woman? Her eyes darted around the room for help. It's, Mrs. She was really panicking now. Mrs. McOld Lady. Yes, Mrs. McOld Lady. Levi snorted. Yasmine shot him a warning glance. Very well then, Mrs. McOld Lady. Come on through, said Mr. Matthews. I'm afraid it's rather busy today. You see, we were supposed to have our checkers tournament final. Oh, what happened? Yasmine said in an inquiring tone. Jilly now came pushing through the crowd, ready to play her part in the master plan. Yasmine had texted her and explained the details. Unfortunately, one of our finalists was disqualified, Jilly announced. It was stupid and definitely not a good idea, Ezra remarked. Yasmine nudged him. What my grandson, means is how unfortunate you had to cancel. It is unfortunate, Mr. Matthews seemed quite frazzled. We even have the other old group from Brixton visiting for the final. It's actually rather embarrassing. I don't know what to do. I say, Mrs. Muckold Lady, Jilly said in her rehearsed lines, weren't you the Bournemouth Checkers finalist a few years back? Why, yes I was, Yasmine replied carefully. Mr. Matthews brightened. Do you two know each other? Yes, old friends, said Jilly. Anyway, isn't it true that you never got to play in the final match, therefore leaving you longing to finish the competition that you had trained your whole life to partake in? Jilly was really getting into her role. She must have been rehearsing the lines the night before. It's true, Yasmine sighed. Now I will never live my dream of playing in a competitive checkers final. There, Grandma, Ezra soothed. though not very convincingly. Acting wasn't his strong point. I guess you will just have to die, never knowing what might have been. Levi rolled his eyes. It's like an episode of EastEnders in here. Mr. Matthews' eyes lit up. Hang on, I think I have an idea. Yasmine, Ezra and Jilly held their breath. Why don't you take the place in our checkers match? Mr. Matthews exclaimed. We can say you qualified in a different area, and no one was good enough to play you, so you had to come here. Oh, Yasmine said. In her head, she was punching the air. Are you sure? Certainly, Mr. Matthews beamed before quietly adding, You'd actually be doing me a favour, with all these people here to see a checkers match. Great, so it's decided. Let's go get ready, Jilly babbled, pulling Yasmine away. Don't leave me, Levi whined, trotting after them. There's people trying to pet me. Good talking to you. Ezra reached up and patted Mr. Matthews on the head before following Yasmine and Jilly in. Yasmine sat nervously at the checkers board, fiddling with her shawl. There was no backing out now, especially since she had some very special fans in the audience. Sitting in a line in the very front row were Amy, Papa, Auntie Bibi and Auntie Gigi. They had all come specially to watch Yasmine, in disguise, compete in the final. Papa had even tried to give Yasmine some last-minute coaching, despite not knowing the rules. Good luck, Yasmine, Papa whispered, leaning towards her. You can do it. Yasmine was relieved to see a grumpy Levi surrounded by a group of old ladies giving him strokes and trying to brush the knots out of his hair. Good. That was one less distraction to worry about. Sitting on the arm of Jilly's armchair, Ezra caught Yasmine's eye and gave her a big smile. He had been practicing with her almost every day to prepare for this. Everyone was here to support her. Now she just had to win. Not only had she worked her bum off all year, but she wanted that £100 prize. The small crowd at Yasmine's previous checkers matches had tripled for the final. Every member of Old, plus the Brixton members, had turned up to see who would win the £100 prize and the coveted golden checker piece. The crowd had come to see a thrilling match, and a thrilling match they would get. Yasmine had won all her matches so far. Why shouldn't she win this one? But then, in what could rank at number 2 in the greatest shocks of all time, the crowd parted and her opponent was revealed to be Mr. Matthews. Don't think I'll go easy on you because you're new, Mr. Matthews said as he pulled up his chair. Don't think I'll go easy on you just because you're old, replied Yasmine. Like me, she added quickly, because I'm old too. Mr. Matthews raised an eyebrow. Let's just get on with it, he said. The judge raised her stopwatch. All the crowd counted down together. 3, 2, 1, go! Mr. Matthews made the first move, hopping his black checker piece forward. Pow! Yasmine moved her left piece forward. Whoosh! Mr. Matthews responded, mirroring her move. Kapow! Stealthily, Yasmine hopped her white piece over his, capturing it. Slam! The crowd cheered. Kick his butt, Levi yelled, dodging a woman trying to put a bow around his neck. But Mr. Matthews had planned this. Just as quickly, he hopped his piece over Yasmine's, capturing it for himself. Wham! The crowd gasped. On and on this went, back and forth, with the crowd going, ooh, and ah, until both Yasmine and Mr. Matthews only had half their pieces left on the board. They were at a tie. But Yasmine had a plan. She had devised a strategy that would distract Mr. Matthews long enough for her to make the winning move. If she could just keep her nerve, she made her best pretend worried face, scrunching up her nose and squinting her eyes, and moved a piece forward slowly. Yasmine, Jilly called out in alarm. Are you sure? Please refrain from advising the competitors, the judge barked. Mr. Matthews smiled to himself and moved his piece closer, much, much closer to Yasmine's king piece, the piece that would win him the game, just as Yasmine had known he would. Mr. Matthews thought he was going to be able to capture Yasmine's king. Mr. Matthews, Yasmine said seriously, looking the group leader in the eye. Yes. She moved her piece forward. I believe I have just won the game. Mr. Matthews' eyes widened in horror. By moving to attack Yasmine's king, he had left his own king exposed. "No!" he yelled, holding his hands to his head. "Don't be a sore loser," Jilly scolded, patting him roughly on the back. "Mrs. Mock Old Lady! Mrs. Mock Old Lady!" the crowd cheered. It was a bit of a tongue twister. They lifted Yasmine's chair in celebration, and then quickly thought better of it when many of their backs cracked loudly. Ami, Papa and the aunties were cheering so loudly that Yasmine noticed a few old members readjusting their hearing aids. "That's my daughter!" Ami screamed, leaving many old members commenting that she looked very good for her age. Jilly kissed Yasmine on the forehead. "You did it, my girl! I'm so happy! I could cry!" "Me too," Ezra added enthusiastically. "Well, maybe not cry, but I knew you could do it, Grandma." He winked. "I always knew you were a winner, Yazzie," Levi called over from the side of the room where a lady was giving him a head massage. "You know, these oldies aren't so bad after all." Yasmine pulled Jilly and Ezra into a hug, smiling from ear to ear. All her hard work had paid off. Practice really did make perfect. It was unfortunately down to Mr. Matthews to present the golden checker piece to Yasmine. They made a small stage out of some upturned fruit and veg boxes for Yasmine to stand on, which she did proudly holding her £100 prize cheque. Ami took about 1,000,000 pictures, and Papa even posted it in the family text chat with the caption, "My daughter the champion. She learned everything she knows from me." As Mr. Matthews brought out the glittering trophy, the audience applauded. It was the shiniest thing Yasmine had ever seen, shaped like a large checker piece and mounted on a wooden stand. "For outstanding gameplay and tactical strategy," Mr. Matthews announced, "I would like to award this trophy to Yasmine Shah." Yasmine's eyes bugged at Mr. Matthews. "How did you know?" she gasped. Mr. Matthews chuckled. "I knew as soon as we started the match. There's only one person I know who can play that well. You might not be an official member of Old, but you really do deserve this, Yasmine." He stretched out his hand to shake, but Yasmine threw her arms around his neck in a hug instead, making Mr. Matthews blush. Ezra got out his phone and shouted, "Come on, give her the trophy!" Mr. Matthews quickly handed the trophy over to Yasmine, and she smiled like an Olympic athlete with the gold medal. She had dreamt of this moment so many times, and now that it was happening, it was even better. In her dreams, she'd never expected to have a best friend standing there cheering for her, but there Ezra was, clapping longer than anyone else and chanting her name. Yasmine knew that she would remember this moment forever. After the awards ceremony, Jilly took Yasmine aside. "What are you going to do now, Yasmine? You can't stop playing checkers just because you're banned from Old." "Don't worry, I've started a checkers club at school with Ezra," Yasmine told her. "So people who prefer a bit of quiet have somewhere to go at lunchtime." "Oh, that's wonderful," Jilly said. "But you will come back and see me, won't you? I always have more fun with you than I do with this ancient lot." Yasmine nodded. "Of course, Jilly. We can go and feed naan to the mice in the park and make the ducks jealous." Jilly giggled. "That sounds like my kind of game." "What will you do with your prize money?" Yasmine looked at her family, getting tea and biscuits and chattering as loudly as ever. "I have a good idea," she said. Chapter 28. Your Local Community Llama. Yasmine sprang out of bed on the first day of Year 6. Downstairs, she could already hear a massive commotion as her family clanged about preparing breakfast. Pots and pans collided as the family raised their voices over the hubbub. Even with her 2 brothers away in Pakistan, the house wasn't any quieter. Unluckily for tall brother and short brother, their flight had been delayed, so they were spending an extra week with Daddy. Yasmine looked at the postcard pinned up on her wall that she had received from them last week. Yasmine chuckled. She had a feeling her brothers wouldn't be teasing her quite so much in the future. "Dear Ami, Papa, Auntie Bibi, Auntie Gigi and Yasmine, we are having a wonderful time with Daddy in Pakistan. We have definitely become better people for..." "Oh good, she's gone." "Help us. It's so boring here. We want to come home. We promise we will be good and never tease Yasmine again. We're sorry. If Daddy comes back and reads this over our shoulders, she will make us wash individual grains of rice again. Help! Hamza and Tariq. She called downstairs, Ami! But she had no chance of being heard over the racket. Walking over to her desk drawer, she pulled out her brand new, top-of-the-range, £100 megaphone and aimed it down the stairs. The megaphone boomed through the house. Ami, can I walk myself to school? Yes, Yasmine, but stick to the main road. Her family certainly had no problems hearing her now. Yasmine got dressed and rushed down the stairs. Tell your friend Ezra to come to tea again, Auntie Bibi said with a smile. We've bought an extra chair so no one has to use the wonky stool this time. Yasmine nodded, grabbed some breakfast and bounded over to the door in her brand new school uniform. The jumper was still a bit itchy and the skirt way too long, but she knew this year was going to be completely different. Checking her watch, she upped her pace and strode along Brick Lane. She just had one more stop to make before school. Yasmine found the hole in the fence and crawled through, clearing the weeds away as she made her way into the paddocks of City Farm. She could have used the main entrance, but the secret entrance was always more fun. As she approached the paddocks at the end of the path, the llamas were being led out for their morning feed. The two white llamas, Daisy and Marigold, clip-clopped sweetly into the paddock and began munching on some grass with contented expressions. A few moments later, and with some resistance, a farmhand emerged from the shed leading a dirty grey llama with a brown stain all over his back legs. Levi! Yasmine ran up to the gates. The farmhand left Levi by the food trough and went to muck out the shed. When he wasn't looking, Yasmine slipped a packet of chocolate digestives from her bag. Ah, that's my girl! Levi grinned, munching up 3 biscuits in one go. How's it going? Yasmine asked, wiping the Levi spit from her hand and getting out more biscuits. Oh, you know, same. Levi moaned through munches. Mama Llama said she's impressed with my charity work, but she still needs to see more evidence before she'll turn me back into a toy. I'll have to wait for the beginning of the next moon month and all that malarkey anyway. Yasmine chewed her lip. What's up? You look like you're constipated, Levi said with a snort. Yasmine bopped him on the nose. I'm nervous about starting year 6, she said. It's going to be the first time the other kids have heard me speak since the purple/poo incident, Levi laughed out loud. Don't worry about it, Yazzie. Just think about me. I don't care what no one thinks of me, and I'm happy as Larry. He grinned. There was a huge piece of green grass stuck in his front teeth. That's very clear. Yasmine picked the grass out. What if they make fun of me again? Levi trotted around in a little circle, thinking. You hold your head high and say in that booming voice of yours, I'm Yasmine Shah and I deserve to be heard, he said. Then you can do a little fart as you walk away. Leave them to deal with that. Yasmine laughed and shook her head. Levi's advice was either complete rubbish or solid gold. She hadn't decided which yet. Now, get going or you're going to be late, Levi said. And you're usually a goody two-shoes. He was right. School started in 15 minutes. Leaving the rest of the chocolate digestives in a grassy patch, Yasmine gave Levi one last pat and headed for the secret entrance. Just before crawling through the little hole, she took one last look back. Levi was munching away, sitting in the grass, a full life-sized real llama. Anyone visiting would think he was just another one of the farm animals. But then he caught Yasmine's eye, stuck his tongue out and blew a huge raspberry. Yasmine giggled and headed for school. You can take the llama out of the toy, but you can't take Levi out of the llama. And that is the end of the book. I hope that you enjoyed that and that it made you laugh. Certainly made me laugh out loud at some points. And thank you for watching and listening. Goodbye.